Hey guys, I'm Danny,
And I'm EJ, and this is the Your Living Proof podcast.
where we talk about addiction and how it affects the family, from the brutal to the beautiful and everything in between. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Your Living Proof podcast. Don't worry, I got the soundboard in front of me again, and I wear headphones, and Blondie does not, so she doesn't get to hear
I can faintly hear it.
my
and
DJ skills over here.
I don't know. I don't think they're real skills,
They are.
but
They're better. You know, everyone who knows me
everyone has
knows
to start somewhere.
I can beatbox, so we can go there too if we need.
Mhm.
Wow. I'm on one today and she's not, so bear with us.
I'm on one today.
Yeah.
When is Danny not on
'Kay.
one, you guys? That's what I want to know.
Let's have a little bit of a marriage dispute, right? A marital dispute right here.
Okay?
How often do we misunderstand each other? Is it-
99% of the time?
Oh, come on. Wow. See,
98?
women are so extreme. It is so extreme, right? It's all or nothing. I was going to say at least like 60% of the time we misunderstand
Yeah.
each other.
Same diff.
If anyone else out there suffers from that too, sometimes I think the challenge of a male and a female and how we interpret things and how we communicate things will always be a challenge.
That's fair.
Gosh,
I think that's fair.
She's on one. We're going to just get right into it then too. We're not going to bore you with any details of our life. Just to be transparent, it's been a very tough one.
Yep.
It's been a brutal, brutal week. Work-related incidences within our own family, with our own children. It's been
Yep.
a lot.
Yep.
So-
We have been in the thick of thick things,
Eating
and that's
a
okay.
slice of humble pie.
Yeah.
But listen, we know the topics here that we talk about are also a little bit difficult because it usually means the listener is dealing with someone that they love dearly, who's suffering from the illness, the disease of addiction.
Yes. And
So-
that is who this podcast is for. So if you're like, "Yep, that's me," then good for you. Thanks
You're
for
in
being
the right
here.
place.
Yeah.
This is to equip you. Like I heard once, I heard recently in a recovery meeting, there was a husband and wife, and the husband was talking about his addiction and how he overcame it. And the wife talked about how everything changed when she had some tools in her tool belt.
Yeah.
And I hope that that's what this is.
Yep.
That every concept we share in every episode, that we give you another tool to put in your tool belt. So this is our podcast number 75. Wow, we've survived that many.
I know. It's so awesome, you guys, and it's been such a fun journey. I've said this before, but like when we set out to do this podcast, it was originally just I thought it was just going to be Danny.
Yeah.
And he did not want to talk into space by himself. And so I joined him. And it has been so fun to meet so many people through this podcast and hear how it's affected so many of you. And so we're grateful you're here. And if you're a fan of the podcast, please know that it always helps us so much when you share it with someone else and when you subscribe or review our podcast.
Yeah. And
Really helps us.
we understand it's never going to be the most viral viewed podcast ever.
No, but it should be because everyone you know could use a listen here.
But it's like the best
being
club that no
honest.
one wants to be in, because we hope those that listen obtain real value.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
real-
no, we
real
know
help.
it.
Yeah, that's it. So today's episode, what we are going to address is one of the most difficult things. If you're a spouse whose partner's in addiction, if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you're an aunt or uncle, you're a sibling, how many times have you tried to get through to your loved one? Right? They're struggling in their addiction. Maybe it's manifested in a terrible way. It's a complete train wreck. Or maybe you're just catching on to signs and it's starting to get bad. How many times have you tried to talk to them? And how many times have you tried to use love and kindness, persuade them, plead with them, beg with them, maybe even threaten them? I guarantee it's a lot of times, probably more than you can remember or that you're willing to admit. So what today's episode is, how do you get through? How do you get through and speak to someone stuck in the trap of addiction?
Yeah, it's I like it because it's the four things. If we could like drill it down to four things that like addiction hates, it's these four things that we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, and addiction hates them. But this is how you speak to that illness in their brain, right?
Yep.
I know you've been trying to get through to that person you love, the person you knew before this,
Mm-hmm.
the person who you know is capable of so many good things. Here's your permission to stop exhausting yourself trying to get through to a person who is sick. Because even if you get through to them in a very clear, articulate way, it's only a matter of time until they consume the poisons. They wet their lips with alcohol. They go and watch porn, or they do something that immediately removes whatever progress you had getting through to them. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will be ironic because the 4 things that we're going to talk about are probably the 4 things that you struggle with the most, wouldn't you say? These are the 4 things that most people struggle with
Yep.
the most. And just as a heads up, the way we're going to go work through them is really like in sequential order of like how you should also approach it.
And just a reminder that consequences don't cure. I know a lot of things have happened and you're wondering when your loved one's going to wake up, when they're going to take the wheel of their life again, when they're going to want more. They're stuck, they're sick, they can't get out. So let's figure out what are the 4 things that are holding you back and how to use these 4 things to actually speak and get through to them.
Right. Okay. So Danny,
Yeah.
tell us what's number 1? What's the first thing that you can do so that addiction actually hears you?
Family unity. And it may sound like a given.
Number 1, family unity.
Over all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen a family come into it who were not somewhat divided, if not entirely divided. Where dad has just had it. He needs him to knock it off. Mom is absorbing all the information in the world, all the feelings. She's holding the whole world together. It's literally crushing her, but yet women are so capable of absorbing all this. Siblings start to build resentments. Everyone involved is affected and impacted in one way or another. So the number 1 thing is family unity.
I mean, okay, I like that and it makes sense. But I'm just going to speak for everyone listening right now going, that's a nice thought.
I told you she's on one today.
That's a nice thought. Family unity. Wow, that would be nice. Like, what if like it's my husband? What if my husband is the one that's the addict? Like he's the one with the problem. Obviously, I'm not going to be unified with him. So like, how do I like navigate that?
Well, I'm sure there are other people that you care about who have an influence in your life. Maybe sisters, mother, a best friend.
Yeah, I mean,
A
I
cousin.
feel like that's always the case. Like you might have one person you feel safe enough to let know, especially when it's like a husband.
Okay, when it's your husband, there's a unique aspect to that because the person you're supposed to count on the most, who you need the most unity with, is not there. They're
Yeah.
not capable. They're sick. You still need to unify yourself with anyone else who's going to have an impact or influence or who are going to be affected by this. Now, the most difficult one is, let's assume you have children.
Yeah, that's
And
really hard.
I'm sure you're worrying like how much to involve them or how to protect them or what they should know or what they shouldn't know.
Yeah, especially if they're young.
And I'm not here to claim I have all the answers to that, but it would be based upon age. But at some point, they've been impacted. So they need to kind of understand what's going on instead of being confused by what's going on. And you may need to communicate it to them differently, articulate it differently. But you need to get yourself a team. And if this is the instance, then you need to involve your parents or his parents, as scary as that is, and let them know that you're doing this and that you need their help.
Yeah, that's tough, but I get it. But what if it's like, what if it's actually just one of your kids and you and your spouse just handle it differently? Like you said, like the mom is usually the one that is like internalizing all the emotions of it, and the dad is usually the one that like has the pleasure of kind of compartmentalizing things and like tuning out.
Well, let me push back. Let me guess. Like your husband's probably had it a little bit. Like
Well, I think that's how most men handle things like that.
So your situation wouldn't be different than anyone else's in that both of you are handling it and being affected by it differently, as is everyone else in the family.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. When people do this on their own and they try to navigate it on their own, that's what I hate about addiction the most. Not only is one person sick, like I was as sick as I've ever seen another human being sick, as far as like depths of my addiction.
Yeah.
But looking back, the thing that was the hardest for me to overcome was the toll it was taking on my family. Watching in an incredible marriage of 30 years, two people that I love, that love each other, start having a divide between them.
Yeah.
So in almost every case, I don't want to say this is the case every time, but mom absorbs things a different way, and dad often gets mad because he wants them just to knock it the hell off.
Yeah.
Come on, they have to man up. They're going to have to take accountability, and they're going to have to do something about this. That's kind of his way to compartmentalize it. And often dads will turn to something, whether that be work or hobbies that they have some control over, as a distraction. And what do moms do? They consume all of the emotion. So when you shift, and maybe the question is, well, how do you do that?
Yeah. I mean,
How do we do that?
How do you accomplish that unity then?
Family unity is accomplished by it's like this process of humbling you and yourself. The families, we talked about this in one of our last podcasts, the families who struggle the most are actually the most fluent families, the educated, like super awesome families, like all of you listening. They've done so many things in life amazing. Like surely they can do this. Surely
Yeah,
they
but
can
it's so hard when when the emotions are so high and you just both feel passionately about things in a totally different way.
Yeah. So the number one way is to reach out and you almost humble yourself. I think with a lot of people, when I've asked them, it's kind of they feel like they have to humble themselves and go ask for help. But when you do that, it changes everything because you will gain the education, you'll gain tools, support, knowledge, everything that you need to give you power to come together so that you don't have to both be separated by the different ways you view the opinion. You can come together in a universal way and set aside your differences and then just get focused on a strategic approach to move forward.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say really is that it's almost like you need to involve a third party that would mediate,
yes,
so to speak,
yes.
like opinions, right? So it's not like, well, I was right, my way was right, or my thought about this is right. It's more like, hey, we need someone that can take our mess and help us sort through the feelings that we have about it and help us come to a unified point on
Right.
it so that we can both move forward together.
Humbly speaking, there's no one better, at least in this country that I know of, than myself to help you with that specific thing. But
No,
yeah,
and you know what? I'm actually not going to push back on that even for a second.
Okay.
I actually don't know anybody that's better at it than you either. And what's amazing is your ability to help even like the toughest dads out there that are just like, I'm the smartest, I know everything, I'm right, are quickly, I don't want to say humbled. I just think they quickly realize, you know what? I have been going at this wrong, and we do need to have a unified front on this, and this is how we're going to move forward.
yeah, and it's okay. Just giving them permission to have their feelings, but then just getting people focused
But
and
yeah.
speaking plain English to them and helping them understand this in a way they hadn't before.
Yeah, but family unity, let's just say family unity is critical, but family unity also can't be achieved really without maybe someone else coming in to help you sort through that.
So I've never seen it happen without other people's help. A few points I just want to finish with. Many think they're unified, but they're not. You're unified in a lot of other things in life, but when it comes to this unique situation called addiction that doesn't play by the rules, you're not united.
Well, maybe you're united in that you both want it to end, but you're not united in how that's accomplished.
Yeah, the intent, yeah. But the strategy, the approach, the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
If you do not unify, then what happens, and you've probably already experienced this, weeks turn into months, months turn into years.
Well, yeah.
And you're
then,
just spinning your wheels trying to get through that.
yeah, and that's where that saying we always say, nothing becomes more permanent than a temporary solution, right? Like then you just start putting Band-Aids on or just start kind of getting to the habit of responding to things a certain way, and then nothing gets done.
All I can promise is when family unity occurs, then the progress begins to happen.
Yeah.
every time.
Has to start there.
Okay, that's number one. Hopefully we drilled that in there, family unity. So what is number two? Boundaries. So what is a boundary? I almost like that word itself. It's just like,
Boundaries is hard.
there's so many different boundaries in life, and we all are kind of terrible at them. Some people are good, but it's not many. So a boundary is a personal boundary. Personal boundaries are physical and or emotional limits that people set for themselves as a way to safeguard their overall well-being. Healthy boundaries help people define who they are as a way to ensure relationships are safe, supportive, and respectful. Gosh.
Which like literally doesn't exist when you love an addict.
Addiction destroys that.
It's like the most unhealthy thing ever.
Unhealthy boundaries are thoughts or behaviors used as a means to manipulate or control relationships to keep people away.
Or just staying put.
Man, that is the absolute definition of what addiction does to a family. It creates those unhealthy boundaries.
Yep.
So I want to talk to why boundaries are important. Nothing speaks louder to addiction, to someone struggling in addiction, than boundaries. I would say action might be even a better word. But one of the best forms of action you can take is your boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You could have told them something 100 times in 100 different ways, but it would go in one ear and out the other. Again, as soon as they wet their lips with this or they consume any of the poisons they're consuming, those feelings are gone.
Yeah.
But a boundary remains.
Yeah, I love talking about boundaries. Actually, I'm one that actually does not really struggle with making boundaries, and I think I learned that kind of the hard way. But let me just take this approach. Let's say I'm terrible at setting boundaries, and let's say, hey, Danny, I don't talk to me about boundaries because I've actually set boundaries a million times. I've set boundaries and boundaries and boundaries as high and as long as the Great Wall of China, and it doesn't matter. Like it's doing nothing. What would you say to that? I've tried. I'm just setting boundaries.
That's great, and it's really good that you've made that effort and to recognize that's needed, and that you did it. But what you set was an expectation and not an actual boundary. You set a hope. Maybe a better word is a hope.
Or a request.
Request, that's a good word. You set a request. Here's what you're requesting they do, but you didn't set an actual boundary. Boundaries are obtained, and I've learned this over years of watching people do it. Boundaries are obtained by having convictions. And what would you say a conviction is? Put you on the hot seat since you keep drilling me.
Well,
Gosh.
I mean, I would just say it's something that you say, this is where I stand and I'm not going to move from this place. Like this is a line you can't cross.
My wife is full of convictions. Is yours?
I am.
She doesn't budge on anything. So, geez, you have all these convictions. But the truth is,
it's true.
That is how you create a boundary, is you have a conviction. Okay, if we're talking about
well, and I would say a conviction is something that like emotion can be tied to, but emotion doesn't dominate it, right? Like regardless of what's going on, you're still going to be able to stand firm in it.
Yeah, and boundaries are obtained by two ways. Your convictions, which stem from your knowledge of the situation, educating yourself of the situation, having a plan in place, establishing. What we do is I try to help everybody start to establish what they're going to do to help this person, what they're going to require of the person, what their role in is that. How do they learn to start helping and not enabling? There's a lot of factors that go into this due diligence of putting this together so that we can have convictions to actually set and, most importantly, hold a boundary. But that brings me to my second point, where I've witnessed for years people have the ability to hold these boundaries opposed to those who don't hold the boundaries are those who have support. So some sort of support group. And in our program, we have a support group that meets at least 2 times a week where they are continually reminding themselves of these truths, continually educating themselves about the program so that they have convictions to set boundaries. And guess what? Here's what I've learned this week more than anything else. And I don't want to get emotional, but it's happened. I've witnessed it in my own life and people really close to me, as well as those in our program. They get forced into these terrible situations. Someone's incarcerated, or someone gets out of jail and has to come live at your house for a couple weeks until they transition into a program.
Mm-hmm.
Or a mother whose child just attempted suicide and had threatened it the week before. Right? Someone else where their loved one got into an accident. Now they're dealing with a physical issue.
Yeah.
There are things that will happen that will move, bend, or even break your boundary. So support is so critical because instead of falling back into dysfunction, these people just stepped back into it.
Yeah.
So they stepped back into dysfunction, which means they
Took one step back.
bent their boundary, but the support, and it's so beautiful because it isn't everybody else like calling them out and saying, hey, you did this. As soon as they admit to other people in the group, well, this is what I did, they know it.
Yeah.
There's like this accountability. And it's okay because there will be failure in these boundaries. But in order not to fall back into dysfunction where that's where you stay, and you said it best. My wife always used to say this quote, and it applies to what I do more than anything else, that the most permanent thing in our life becomes these temporary solutions.
Yeah.
So then what they're learning is how to do it different.
Yeah.
But-
Well, and to just step back to point number one, that I can see why without family unity in place, boundaries would not be effective because one person might have a boundary and then the other person might not, or the other person said they have a boundary, but they just kind of let it go. I mean, am I
Correct.
right?
Correct. Also, by unity, I do want to clarify something. People might not get on board with you immediately, but when you tell people what your intentions are, I've seen it's happened so often. Moms are such soldiers. They often start this process, right? Where like they're like, that's it. We're getting help. I'm doing it. I'm pulling the trigger. And then I don't know, sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks. The husbands catch wind of what they're learning or saying or how they're changing,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings them in.
Yeah.
So sometimes unity, you can request it, but like you taking action is what brings that unity in.
Yeah.
When people see that you've been, because watch, everyone in your life has watched for years or weeks or months, most likely years, you acting a fool and responding to all these different situations.
Yeah.
But when they see you change and you've now communicated to them that you're learning, you're in a program of your own, you're getting tools in your tool belt, the unity happens because you were like the trailblazer. So that's an
Yeah.
important part.
I love that. And I think what they're observing is the peace that comes over your life, really.
Yeah.
And they want that too.
Yeah. And so the
Um,
boundaries, if you've tried to do them on your own, it's okay if they failed. Even people who are getting help, those boundaries sometimes are difficult. The support is to keep you accountable. It's kind of like the rudder on a boat, right? That's what I look at the Living Proof program is a lot of these people that they know where they're going, but the rudder helps you from getting off the path
Yeah, that's a really, really
when
good
the storm
point.
comes,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. And I want to say, I do think that a lot of women struggle with boundaries, mainly because women tend to have these guilty feelings of like, "Oh, well, now this is selfish. Like I should help them more. Like I'm not being compassionate or Christ-like. Like they'll sit there and tell themselves like things, beat themselves up because they're trying to hold a boundary. But the way I think about boundaries is it's literally a way to say, I can't control you and I don't want to. I'm not even going to try to because I know that that's impossible. But I can control me, and here are things that are okay for me. And beyond that, I'm not okay with it.
Yeah.
And that and specifically when you're talking about someone who's an addict, that is probably the most threatening state of mind that you can get in with them, because when you set a boundary, you make yourself really difficult to be manipulated.
Yeah.
And addicts are used to being able to manipulate you. That's what they're the most professional at, is manipulating.
Well, if you're addicted like I was, the boundary becomes almost a physical thing. Like, a fence holds you from going over here. Your loved ones told you they've I don't know how many times they've tried to get through to you, but when they see the boundary set, the action, and then they actually can feel it. It becomes permanent.
Yeah, and just because you set a boundary does not mean that they're going to respect it, but it does mean that you just need to follow through with your plan still.
Correct. Which brings to point 3. We've got to hurry through this.
Oh, are we in a hurry today?
I'm always in a hurry.
Oh, okay.
Like my attention span is about 10 minutes from over.
Oh, shoot. That's terrible.
It's the same as like when we're having conversations at home. Like halfway through your conversation, I just fade off.
Yeah, it's true, guys. It's why we struggle so much.
Okay, boundaries is a big one. Number 3 is action.
Okay.
Why is it that when it comes to a person in these situations, someone we love that's dealing with his addiction, why is it so hard for us to take action?
I don't know, because you feel bad, because you're scared, you're terrified. You're probably most terrified that they're just going to run off and be killed.
Fear. Fear is used every chance it gets by the disease of addiction. And why? Because it's actually very effective.
Yeah. It's very real.
In this assessment that I have when I first meet people and go through it, one of the very first few questions is, do they or how often do they threaten suicide? That's kind of a big question to come out the gate with. But that's the level of fear that they put into it. And there's always the other fears, like you said, that if you take action, maybe they go out and something happens and it pushes them over the edge, or things could possibly get worse. So why is why is action so critical? Because I hope that you have come to realize, or you soon come to realize, that there will never be a magical day when your loved one just wakes up and says, you know what? Gosh, my life has gotten out of control and I need some help. It won't. Someone or something must intervene. You've heard that before, and you've heard me say it before if you've listened to any of these shows. Someone or something has to intervene. I have never even heard of a situation in the last 15 years where that wasn't the case. Now, what intervenes? There are 3 things. Often, and far too often, death intervenes, stops the show. The other option is a judge. Okay, they finally did something. They broke the law. They got caught. They hurt someone. A judge steps in and says, all right, you go do this or you're going to prison. Intervenes. It's pretty effective. The third is a family. For everyone out there who thinks this person they love, your child, this capable human, your husband, is going to someday just, something's going to trigger them and happen that they will just do this for themselves, please stop waiting for that day. That's why we don't take action. We're either fearful or we're just hoping for this thing to just magically change.
Yeah. So why is it so hard? Like, that's why. Is they're just stricken by fear.
Yeah.
It just controls them.
There's a very critical part to this process of addressing and facing your biggest fears. That if you do all that's required, which will allow you to have the convictions to set boundaries. And when I say required, you've strategically figured out ways to get them help, all these other things. That you're going to have to face your biggest fear, that you might do something that could possibly make things worse.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, so I want to know, like, let's say I have a kid that I already sent to treatment. He's actually been twice. Like, we've gone through treatment twice. We've spent a ton of money. Every time we've sent him, it's lasted, a little while, a few months at best, that we've been able to string together. I've set boundaries with him, but what action can I take?
Well, you've done a good job. You've gotten really close. Most of the people I worked with, they've gotten really close. They missed the mark by just a little bit. And it's going back and understanding the whole picture. Everything that it's going to require of them to get to heal, not just getting them to rehab. What happens next? What's the segue after that? There's a lot of components that the world and the system is not educating the family that are required. This isn't a magical recipe. It's not like you send them somewhere for 30 days and they come home and they're fixed. There's a long-term plan of recovery, which we clearly outline in the program, of what they're going to need to do. The elephant in the room is they're like, well, how am I going to get him to do that?
I think that's it. It's like, how do you grapple with that? Like, okay, well, but they're an adult, so I can't make them do it.
Yep. So your action is getting help and support for you to better understand what it's going to take, how to do it better, what the whole picture looks like, what your role is in that, what they're going to have to do, and what happens if they don't do it. You're going to just have to get a few more of those tools in your tool belt. That's the action.
And that right there is seriously what we do best. Not to toot our own horn, but
It is.
it's amazing.
It changes everything because now when you're taking action, you're not taking a reaction to a terrible situation or a threat or an overdose or something. You're actually taking action to say, you know what? I now understand things better. I understand my role better.
Yeah.
I've actually understood how I've been affected. I'm a healthier person, which means I'm a healthier person for you, and here's how we're going to do it. So your action's different, but you have to take action. If people don't take action, then nothing happens. And the reason most people don't take action is because of their faith. They're really faithful, or maybe they blame it on something. They don't take action because, you know what? My kid was bullied and this terrible thing happened to him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we're in a situation that if we just keep focusing on why, we're never going to do anything.
Yeah.
There are legitimate things that might do it. And a lot of people, like I talked about earlier, just keep hoping for this miracle to happen. It's not. There's also financial situations, like life circumstances, like health, children that come in the way. So we take action, and we're going to approach our biggest fears. We're going to realize the difficulties ahead of us. But what we're doing is giving your loved one a chance that they will not get in any other way.
Do you know the thing that I think holds a lot of people back from taking action? At least if you're a wife and your husband is struggling, the number one thing, in my opinion, that holds people back from taking that action that you're talking about is this insurmountable pain that comes from the thought that my dream might be over. Like, this could be the end of my dream of us and our family and what I thought was going to be. And I think that really does cause people to say, oh, I'm actually even willing to live in the discomfort of this crazy life that I'm in rather than take action because I'm not ready to let go of my dream of what I thought this was going to be or what I wanted it to be or what I know it could be if they changed, right?
Such a good, valid point. We did an episode recently on that, like, what if I'm not chosen? But it's a good thing, and I'm glad you bring it up because it's everyone's fear. And so therefore, that usually holds them back from taking action, which further solidifies why you need support to have someone to continue to hold your hand to the fire, that yes, that is a possibility, that your dream could be over. Yes, it's a possibility that it could push them away or something bad could happen. But I will spend every waking moment of the rest of my life fighting for families to get to that point where they face that fear and are willing to say, I am doing this to give you a chance. And if these things happen, I'm gonna learn to live with that because I've done all of this stuff in preparation to help you and also to give you a chance. What no one wants to just admit is everyone thinks they're clinically unique from the next person, that this won't be the reality for them, that it'll be different for you than it is for anybody else. If you don't intervene,
Amen.
if you don't learn to do these things, there will never be a chance. So that's it. Okay, we're going to get into the last one.
Okay, number 4.
My brain's just starting to go, I'm hungry. I got to do this.
So we had family unity, boundaries, action, and then number 4
see what
is...
she does? Like she just like you just corralling a horse or something.
I have to.
As soon as I start to
When
talk,
I
she
married Danny, I realized that I had to operate out of that space.
Wow. Okay, number 4 is silence. This is a big one. And it's amazing the power that it has.
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody's got to the point where they've just had it. It's consumed them. It's just so just consuming, and they're just need a break from a minute. How do you insert silence? It's by everything we just talked about. Doing all of this due diligence, going through all these steps, learning boundaries, taking action, getting unified so that you can say, no, today I don't need to answer all of your calls, threats, live in a place of fear. There's a phrase I love. when the silence becomes deafening. That's the goal for a family, to do everything that's required, get the support, tools in their tool belt so
All
that
together.
they can make their silence deafening. And what does that mean? Maybe not responding all the time to their loved one. Maybe not taking that call from jail when they've called you 12 times already that day. Maybe not ruining your whole Saturday looking at your phone, dreading the texts and calls that are going to come.
Yeah.
How does that speak to addiction? Well, it turns into a physical thing again. They're so used to being able to just reach out, get you for good or for bad, for begging or threatening you, that when all of a sudden you're not taking those calls, when all of a sudden they're like, they've hit redial 12 times and you didn't answer, all of a sudden they're like, oh.
And no one else answered either.
And this is what's so crazy is the disease of addiction takes the best of people and it makes them just insanely retarded for a minute. Sorry, I just used that word, but it's just like, I don't know another word to use. My vocabulary is not as big as Blondie over here. Went to a nicer school than me. Well, she thinks, but
I did.
It makes you unable to like
process
the way a normal human would.
Yeah.
So someone that you love who was amazing at one point, they might call you 27 times. They might just text you all this stuff and act like a crazy person. They're sick.
Yeah.
So silence is a big one. It's Rick. How do you achieve that? How do you achieve it? Well, like we said, all the steps above, but you have to have help and support.
Well, I want to know though, like I'm listening to you say this and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm willing to do it. But also, what if it sends the message and then they're like, okay, like I want help. Help me.
That's a good point. You know, that's what a lot of people.
You're not going to know if you never answer the phone.
Yeah, like they're unable to do silence because of what? It's because of hope.
That
what
like,
if they do
what
reach
if
out and
they're
want help?
like, I want help?
It's a good point. So silence is a funny thing. You create silence in a way that they're like, oh my gosh, like why aren't they responding to me? The illness is going to be threatened. It's like, oh, this is a problem. But for that specific reason, just one example that I share with people is you eliminate the forms of communication down to something like an email, for example, right? If people are losing their minds, it's so easy to text you or call you or send you voice memos or whatever it is that people do.
Yeah.
You can set a boundary to say, no, I'm not going to field all of your calls.
Yeah, I'm blocking you.
I've now set a boundary. I am taking action, and I can do that because we're now unified.
Yep.
Leave email open. If they are finally get to a point where they're like, okay, fine, I'll go do your plan, they can send you an email. You can choose to check it a couple times a day, once a day.
Yeah, when it's convenient for you.
Every hour if you want, but at least you're not fielding these crazy calls and you created this boundary where you're speaking to the disease in their brain and all they hear is silence because they just want to hurry quickly. It's amazing how many people, they filter 90% of it into an email, for example. Most people aren't going to sit there and stop that are intoxicated, high out of their mind or whatever, and like draft an email. They'll probably voice type it and it's just going to be a whole bunch of jumbled mess. But they're going to do that a heck of a lot less than they are being able to call and text you. But this is what changed everything in my life. My addiction of many years came to a halt in a matter of weeks. It was more weeks than anybody wanted, but we went from years to weeks when my family learned how to do this.
Yeah.
And no family's able to do deafening silence or to set that boundary until they've gotten tools in their tool belt, help and support, and knowledge of the situation. Then they can say, you know what? No, we are so ready. We know how to help you, what that looks like. We know the entire plan. We know our part in this. So you know what? No, we're done.
You know, and I love that. So that's what I love so much about our program and our community is that when families do that, it is, you think your life is going to be better. And it is, but it's also harder, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it is better because you can access a place of peace in that.
Yeah, and a big one is when you do this, you actually prove to yourself that you're holding that boundary. Not only are you speaking to their illness and actually getting through to them, but you can say, I did it.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding to look at yourself and give yourself that self-respect.
Yeah.
And even if it's like, I'm not going to take their calls for 3 days, maybe it's too hard to think about long term. The the silence is like your way of solidifying that boundary
Yeah.
and not responding to it. I know all these things sound like they make sense, but they're very difficult to do. All of these things hinge on you having continued support to stand your ground
Yeah. And to be accountable.
and to be accountable. And what it does, it will, without a doubt, speak to your loved one's illness in a way nothing has before, but it gives you permission to finally say, yeah, I deserve a break. And what if your break was just for a day? Wouldn't that be nice? There's a few mothers in our program today in our group that we're sharing. There's actually one that's just got back and 2 others that are taking vacations.
Yeah. How beautiful.
And they're not even going to worry. And one of them, their loved one's in treatment. The other one, he's not in treatment. And the other one, they honestly don't know right now. But they've done so much work on themselves and their own recovery that they can just go and enjoy themselves.
I love that so much. And I just want to say, it's interesting to think about what other things have you tried that haven't worked?
Yeah.
Has anger ever worked against addiction? No.
And like we said, all this makes sense, and you already know this. It's just the strategic way of doing it and having someone hold you accountable
Yeah.
to doing it. And I do want to say, I want you to finish up with what you're going to say. My family's amazing. And they had spoke to me in so many different ways for so long, using every tactic they could come up with, and they're amazing people. But when they did this, I didn't even know they were doing this. But all these steps got them prepared to present that silence. That's when all of a sudden I was like, what the heck? And it even took a few days for it to register. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're not answering my calls. To where
Yeah.
my sick brain was just like, oh gosh, well, I'm going to have to go figure out another option, or I'm going to have to go figure something else out because they're not taking my calls.
Yeah. It's
But
crazy.
they never, here's the key, they never did the deafening silence without a lifeline. They had told me over and over. And again, they used email back then where it's like presenting their gift of how to help. So I always knew that although they weren't taking my calls, like if and when I wanted a way out, there was one.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. So I'm going to close with the serenity prayer for families, as always.
Which is ironic because it's right to this point.
Yes. God grant me the serenity to accept that I cannot change other people, the courage to change the person that I can, and the wisdom to know that it is me.
See that? Queued that right up again. We love you guys. Thanks for joining in. And like we said earlier, please, if this resonates with you, let us know. Reach out, communicate with us. Let us know other things we can share that would be helpful, and also share it with somebody else who needs it. You guys have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Bye.